Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Monday, June 19th. Alright, I'm gonna say I'm dealing with a minor emergency at the moment, so at any point I might have to jump out of this stream. So apologies if we just end abruptly. But on the good news, it doesn't seem like there's that much news today anyways. Over this weekend was Father's Day, and then today I think is Juneteenth. Yeah, June 19th I think is Juneteenth. So you have two holidays potentially slowing down video game news. Also you have just us recovering from the Summer Game Fest. And so we're kind of back to slow mode anyways. The Synchro Fest has opened. I've played some of one of the festivals off screen. Let's see, but noticeably it says Duel in Festival June, and so they've potentially combined the festivals together of the two challenges, which, okay. That's a little weird. Now, I will say, over the weekend, I dropped the ball, as I fairly consistently do, as far as scheduling. So I still have some videos I need to schedule, particularly once I get all the videos scheduled that I have uploaded right now, and then just a little bit more. I may never really have to schedule videos in the same way. Again, it may be a much more automated process, much easier process. It probably isn't going to be that much quicker, but just having the ability to walk away and have the program run itself, I think will just give me more free time. Maybe give me more free time to jump in and do a Lego or something else offline while my computer is processing things. I got all the YouTube shorts out, notably for the Summer Game Fest, but notably none of them seem to really send out notifications, and I kind of question if maybe there is this point here where I shouldn't try and send out notifications around YouTube Shorts at all. It's very possible that people are only seeing shorts from the Shorts feed, and nobody is actively trying to click on shorts from notifications of people who they're subscribed to, which that would be fairly typical also for YouTube to just further push people to look at suggested videos and less watch things they actually have subscribed to. That way they can push more and more people to fewer and fewer top tier super successful chosen one channels. I feel like a lot of stuff is probably going to unlock by this time next week. Seems like that would be about the time. Maybe a little bit later than that. I don't think we've gotten anything new in the solo stories. Nothing relatively new. So yeah, I played some of this legendary anthology deck, and it would make some sense. I've gotten pretty decent at playing this deck. It makes some sense to play this for 2 more victories, or at least until I get to 5,500. And this is considered a festival, and this ends in 6 days. And then they've thrown out this new Synchro Festival, which it too really makes a lot of sense to get to 5,500. I don't really care about the titles, and frankly, at this point, getting 2 legacy packs is not worth much of anything. In particular because I don't think the legacy packs now are even giving you like extra cards that you can disassemble. So there is this whole, yeah, there's this whole situation where they've created these multiple layers of currency, and then they're giving you tons of legacy cards that can't be disassembled anyways, or don't seem like they can be. I also played a little bit of ranked here. The interesting gameplay for today would be to try out these different synchro decks, and yeah, it's probably not really worth it to even look at it. Let's just hop in and start playing. So yeah, several hours of the Lord of the Rings adventure card game were played, and I finished the first campaign, which really I think is the events of The Hobbit, not the Lord of the Rings. So I wouldn't be surprised if 2 out of the 3 campaigns are actually the events of The Hobbit instead of the Lord of the Rings book. But in finishing the first campaign, it didn't give me a massive amount of the in-game currency, fellowship points, and as such, it does then give me the feeling that you really have to grind quite a bit in the solo player mode. And yeah, grinding in the solo player mode to unlock cards, to get deep into a deck building game just to build more decks, to then play the same solo mode campaigns a second or a third time to unlock more cards, to play the same campaigns a fourth or fifth time at potentially higher difficulties. It doesn't create the biggest motivating factor, inherently, because Lord of the Rings, the adventure card game, just has no online player base. It's really hard to justify trying to play it. It's really hard to justify that all the cards aren't just unlocked. Yeah. Even if they were selling like $1 bit of DLC to unlock all the cards, I think that would make a lot of sense. But really, when they put out the definitive edition, they probably knew that they didn't care about the game that much anymore, and that the player base was just going to be incredibly low online, so at that point all the cards should have just unlocked. There's major problems compared to a trading card game like Yu-Gi-Oh! When looking at the Lord of the Rings adventure card game, in that there is only 100 cards, and all the strategy really boils down to is something very similar to what that first generation of Yu-Gi-Oh! Video games were before they really had even established the rules of the card game, where for the vast majority of time in Lord of the Rings, you just put a character in defense mode and try to reduce the amount of damage they take in a defense mode, and do some damage to the attacker as well because they're in defense mode. So it's like almost every turn, half of your characters at least need to be put in defense mode, and then it's after that point you start to try to play any other strategy. But you really can't have that many strategies because it has this threat level that starts at like 18 or higher, depending on the 3 heroes you select at the start of in building your deck. And when the threat level gets to 50, you lose the game automatically. Plus, there are cards that increase the threat level. So, even if you were trying to make a longer, I will take that victory. Even if you were trying to make a longer strategy or play for a longer amount of time, the game is just not really designed for that. It's also designed for rounds, and by going through those rounds, you don't really know what the requirement to pass the next round is going to be, or the enemies that you'll encounter in the next round. So you would have had to play every scenario in single player once to have a general idea of what was going to happen, then play it a second time after rebuilding your deck to counter that strategy. There is also some weirdness around the Lord of the Rings adventure card game in that it is a variant, a spin-off, kind of reimagining of the Lord of the Rings real-world tabletop card game, which has a lot of expansions, a lot more than the digital game does. So the only people I really could suggest the digital version of the game to is somebody who has probably spent at least $1,000, I would guess, on the Lord of the Rings tabletop games and have just played them to death, which basically means you'd have to have a circle of friends, between 2 and 4 friends, maybe even an extra friend or two, who are all in love with Lord of the Rings, just obsessed with it, to the point where you would have played this card game on a weekly basis, and just burnt yourself out on playing the tabletop game to the point that you would also want to play the digital variant on top of that. It's not really a substitution. It's not even much of a supplemental thing. Yeah, and at a certain level, I think probably would just start playing Dungeons and Dragons or something like that to supplement a Lord of the Rings card game. Hey, there's a new animation there. What should I bring, I wonder? Okay, so I think I want to summon this, then activate this, and then so we don't want that one. So I think we want this, weirdly. And then assume I want to summon this just for attack. Let's see what we can banish or what we should banish. Guess you want that in the graveyard. We can banish another fish. No graveyard. Our hand. See, I think you want this card first. Yeah, that was definitely a lot there. And I don't know if... Yeah, I don't think any of that is going to help me. There's clearly a strategy here of banishing cards, but you've got to get the order exactly right. I'm going to just save some time here. And activate a spell. Just so it stops prompting me. So yeah, I've been playing Lord of the Rings. It probably will take another 10 hours. Because it takes about an hour to play each level anyways. Each quest, and there's 5 quests per campaign, and there's 2 campaigns. So bringing back things that have been banished. That might be somewhat helpful. Both of these are synchro summon effects, so let's see if we can actually synchro summon 2 things at the same time. Interesting, so we've got it there. But the question, I guess, will come down to whether this character has enough of an effect to defeat this character. Which I have no idea what this guy's effects are. This destroys defense monsters. Activate that effect. Banish this. And then get a 6. Summon. Which probably means I want to banish these 2 cards. Because then they'll just come back. On top of playing Lord of the Rings the adventure card game, I made massive amounts of improvements to OBS. I hope everything is working perfectly and I didn't add any real instability there. But I have created automations to automatically add, let's just show it, the ticker at the top, the white and black bars that scroll. That is the same program run twice, just 2 instances. And so before, when I would start a live stream, I would just run the program twice, which is just redundant work. And It's all about just trying to optimize things. I have now automated incrementation and automatic naming of files, which for the most part that works. It works in kind of a wonky way in that it waits for me to record for 5 minutes, then it changes the number, the episode number after the fact to a bigger number, which that's fine for OBS. It seems to remember the previous file name and seems to not have a real problem with that. The worst case scenario in something like that would be that I accidentally hit the recording button and then 5 minutes occur and then it increments up and then we have a one number off episode number. When I'm recording a solo recording, it changes the name. And when I'm making YouTube shorts, it automatically grabs the name. So I have 3 different systems that are all somewhat similar, but all customized. They are all recording into different folders for better organization too. And that really has just laid down the foundation for a much more automated, if not 100% completely automated, upload process going forward. Well, we may win pretty easily here. Let's try a different deck. Just for fun. I've been playing less and less, I guess, of my favorite waifu anime game, Destiny Child. The current event is about to wrap up, and they've automated everything on that so much that I really am now capable of jumping into Destiny Child and only spending maybe 20 or 30 minutes a day on it, although I do jump into it multiple times, still for one specific challenge that refreshes faster than that. I've been playing Star Trek Lower Decks, which that eventually I think is going to slow down, but it keeps giving me events. I think I'll probably burn through the events though, or maybe not. Maybe the idea is that it's just going to constantly have a new event that keeps your focus, because the main game part of it is definitely already slowed down quite a bit. Let's see. Is this a resonator card? That's a resonator card. Add one resonator monster from your deck to your hand. You can see Ash Blossom has a 62% usage rate. Which definitely highlights that it is a card to play. I've also been playing the new Marvel Snap setup. I am somewhat confused as far as how these conquest challenges are really supposed to be played. It does seem like the daily quest that Marvel Snap is giving you is not really in line with the amount of time I think you would actually have to spend to unlock everything in this new secondary shop for the conquests. And yeah, it definitely feels like I'm going to end up just having to pick and choose the few really important unlocks in this secondary conquest conquest shop. Yeah. So yeah, over the weekend a lot of gameplay happened. Just like 4 different games: Marvel Snap, Star Trek Lower Decks, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel playing off screen, which was extra, and Destiny Child. The efficiency I probably managed over the weekend may in part be built around Reddit still being semi-shut down. It definitely seems to me like some Reddit moderators have been replaced or threatened, and thus they have unlocked those forums, although it does also seem like some of the smaller ones are still locked and just not getting posts. Although at a certain point, if you're just following like the RSS feed of the front page or looking at the front page of Reddit, I imagine they could just replace what subreddits were showing up on the front page too. I would say about 50% of all the RSS feeds I have on my phone are from Reddit. So if it shuts down, if it fails completely, and there isn't really a solution to go somewhere else, that's going to be a big loss for me as far as time wasters, but also as far as staying informed in some categories. Speaking of staying informed, I've tried to see some reviews of this new version of Debian, codenamed Bookworm, and if anything, it seems like it is surprisingly normal. Doesn't seem like there is anything new to the new version of Debian Linux, so that's probably the way they would do things. Let's see, we see Cherry Cloud on the chat going, WTH, are those octopus? Never seen those before. Yep, that is at one level the idea. Certainly is that these festivals are supposed to show off cards that people don't play and haven't seen before. But at a certain point, since this is a synchro deck, I think you're probably seeing cards that would have been majorly pushed in the third Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime spinoff. If I'm guessing correctly, because you had Yu-Gi-Oh! And Yu-Gi-Oh!'s main gimmick originally was fusion summoning, and then later on it was summoning out of your hand in using special effects. Sometimes that would be ritual summoning. Then in the second spin-off anime, it was the main gimmick was XYZ summoning, and then the third spin-off anime was, I think, synchro summoning, and then I think the fourth Yu-Gi-Oh! Spin-off anime, which just goes to show that there's a bunch, was pendulum summoning. And then I think the fifth spin-off is Link summoning, and then the weirdly sixth anime spin-off is Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush as a concept. And yeah, you can watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush as a concept on Hulu, and I did, and that's effectively just trying to reboot Yu-Gi-Oh! 100%. It's just not the same game at all. You have only 3 monster spaces. You can summon as many monsters as you want. It's definitely trying to address the complaints that have since popped up recently in the last 30 days around Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, in that the state of Yu-Gi-Oh! With its 10,000 plus cards has just gotten fairly unwieldy. Unlike Magic the Gathering, and I like the fact that they aren't doing something like Magic the Gathering where they ban the vast majority of their cards. Magic bans on a rolling 12-month window as far as its tournament rules go, which allows Magic to reprint the same cards over and over again and resell the same cards over and over again, which is sucky. But yeah, they're trying to just push Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush. The problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush, though, is there really is just not enough complexity there. It's too simple. Maybe eventually Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush would get complicated enough and would have just a smaller player base of cards. You could probably fix a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! If you got rid of normal cards. That wouldn't change much in the game, but it would say, hey, you just can't play normal cards, or you could potentially even introduce cards that supplement non-effect monsters quite a bit, to the point where they might be better off. If you all of a sudden said non-effect monsters get double their attack and double their health, then that could bring them back into being somewhat useful. Otherwise, maybe you merge all the extra dex summonings. Maybe you get rid of the extra monster zones, which I'm not sure adding the extra monster zones was a smart move when it really only makes sense for link summoning. If you got rid of the extra monster zone here and had never added that, then link summons would always have had to potentially been played in the center lane and then point to the left and right, and then your second link summoned character could be to the left and right, and your third could be to the left or right, and maybe even have an instant win condition if you have 5 link summoned monsters. The biggest problem, of course, is just that there's too many cards. Let's see. Do I have anything more to say as far as catch-up / accountability section? Yeah, over the weekend, I feel like I was really efficient. I also managed to watch, like, Nosferatu. Start watching that. This is a thing that is about to leave Hulu. And it's written by Joe Hill, aka one of Stephen King's sons. And I would say go into it thinking that it's going to be somewhat like a weird Stephen King story. But also don't get stuck on the Nosferatu name or the vampire element to it, because that seems to be, for the most part, not a big thing. Like, it doesn't seem to be a big part of the focus. I'd definitely say you're dealing with other magical people with magical abilities more than just vampires. You don't see... It definitely is not a Buffy TV series or anything like that where you're killing vampires, staking them, chopping off their head, at least as far as I've seen. Or that there are just random vampire enemies even. If anything, I'd say at least half of Nosferatu is a weird broken family drama story. And that's an interesting split between the accusation that is sometimes thrown at Stephen King, where he always writes about middle-aged men who are writers as the main protagonist, and Joe Hill instead writing about a 18-year-old girl with magical powers. I was also watching Silo on Apple TV. I'd recommend watching Silo only after the entire season is finished. There's, unfortunately, in my mind, just no tolerance anymore for weekly releases, and I'm not sure I ever really liked weekly releases. Like, when I think about when I was a teenager and really getting into heavy amounts of TV and movie watching, I was mostly buying box sets of anime, which effectively meant I was binging TV, Japanese anime TV, but TV nonetheless, in entire seasons, in entire series, beginning to end, with no breaks. So trying to watch something like Silo on a weekly basis, I just can't really tolerate it. And yeah, that's pretty much true for anything. Like, Silo, if anything, is a perfect example of a show that should probably be watched on a weekly basis. It just doesn't really work for me, and I don't think it works for anybody. Netflix has taught everybody to binge everything. The next step is to figure out how to make these streaming services actually finish series. Like, even Severance on Apple TV Plus is in this weird situation where it seems like there should have been a second season by now, but there hasn't been. Maybe in a couple months we'll get that second season. And yeah, at a certain point it's not even entire seasons. You want to see the entire series. Yeah. I probably haven't slept much over the weekend, but I don't feel particularly bad about that either. Because just laying it out, it does seem like I accomplished quite a bit. All of that while still feeling somewhat under the weather. I think I may have figured out that I just needed to eat more fiber, because I was really feeling gassy and bloated for the past week or two, which certainly would be a new symptom of IBS for me, and I'll leave it at that. So we really didn't even look at this card set. It does seem like you have one dragon set, and then you have two water-based sets. One of the other things that I managed to work on, and we'll see it later, is now I was able to program Advanced Scene Switcher, a macro in it, to automatically blur the screens when we start to look at games on Steam. So no longer should we have the situation where I'm over here and then I close the tab and then I have to immediately run to the other screen because it's showing some adult content that is, I guess, if displayed too long, considered YouTube family unfriendly. like, I would definitely say it falls deep into the realm of not being YouTube family friendly. That being said, YouTube has not had any problems with any of my content so far. Of course, now with these half-step monetization standards, I wonder if a actual evaluation might happen, but I can only wait and see what happens there. You'd think at this point I'd be able to synchro summon something, but nope. Now if this is more than 1,000, if he can activate something. Just continuously attack things. Might be playing directly into his hand here. That didn't seem like that worked out too well for me, but whatever. Can't do anything else. We do have a Video Games Chronicle article here. We might as well just jump into the news. Xbox says that the VR market is currently too small for it to chase. Studio boss Matt Booty once again getting some press here. Definitely seems to be getting a lot more press, 4 or 5 times as many articles quoting him than Major Nelson is. So it definitely feels like he's being set up to replace Major Nelson. Do I disagree with his statement? Not really. Like, remember, Xbox tried for 2 generations with the Kinect, and if anything, I think the Kinect technology concept maybe had a better idea than wearing goggles and all of that, but the technology was just not there. The Kinect effectively is what we would call a laser radar LiDAR setup, or image motion detection setup, probably a little bit of both in the setup, and that is now the technology that we are somewhat seeking and using in automating cars to at least assist drivers. So now that this is destroyed, maybe I can do something more. Well, weirdly, this effect should not work. You forgot that I had already activated a trap card here that would have motivated that ability. Well, let's grab this. Like, none of these seem like these are that devastating of cards. I definitely feel like it just, as far as VR, we need much lighter VR setups and technologies, and we may literally hit a point where the technology just cannot get light enough and small enough as a headset. And then we end up creating some other kind of technological devices to wear instead. Wrist bracelets, necklaces, breaking the items up that way potentially in different pieces of jewelry. Man, still just nothing can be done here. Alright, well. Negate that. Then get rid of this one, I guess. He's got his synchro summon going. Now we've got two things I can't defeat. Sorry, I need to play. Sorry. I'm going quiet too. That's one of my concerns certainly around playing like playing Lord of the Rings, the card game, too. 1,000 attack during the damage calculation only. And nothing here. Just put that in defense position. And for time's sake, I'm just going to activate this. And just get rid of something in his deck. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle also says that the Devil May Cry designer says that Final Fantasy XVI is his personal masterpiece. He previously worked at Capcom with the Devil May Cry series. Is this the director though, or is he just one of the developers? Because the director has been pretty grumpy, to use a smaller word than what I really would use, around just the fan base and the reception around Final Fantasy XVI. Personally, I kind of understand it too. It does somewhat make some sense that it feels like Square Enix is not really trying to promote Final Fantasy XVI anywhere as much as the previous big Final Fantasy game was. I think that would have been 15. There was a lot of hype around that Final Fantasy. That being said, this Final Fantasy game also looks very much in a feudal Tolkien-esque fantasy world, where Final Fantasy 15 was more in that futuristic appearance. Okay. Now this attacks this guy and loses 1,000. Still don't think that would be enough. So if Curse doesn't do anything, maybe this spell card will do something. I definitely don't want to see games fail, so I kind of hope that Final Fantasy 16 is an amazing game, and it's just being undersold at the moment. But I don't know if I really believe that. Is that gonna I thought that was gonna get banished. If anything, it seems like this deck is built around a lot of defense monsters that would die, and then the curse would cause it to do direct health damage. Alright, so summon this. This is weird to have this effect of damage effect. It's just a vortex. Activate this. Guess give me that. What is the other effect here? Yeah, that doesn't seem like that's doing much of anything. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Splatoon 3's upcoming DLC will feature new and different gameplay, according to the producer, but there's no current release date for the second piece of DLC for the game. I wonder if they're feeling a little bit of pressure from Foam Stars. And then Hideo Kojima was interviewed again, so he apparently wants to leave Earth to make a game you can play in space. So please, someone send me up to space. Which, yeah. I think that is definitely the weirdness of Hideo Kojima, and if anything, just a general lack of focus on actually making video games. Why in the world would you make a game that is even slightly better to be played in space when the number of people that will be in space in the next 100 years will probably count in the dozens? That's really ridiculous. And what is so special about being in space that would make a game better or even different? Like, unless he's not talking about a video game. If he's talking about some kind of physical game, maybe there's a thought there, but being weightless, floating around in space really is not going to change anything for the better. It's going to make your eyesight worse. It's going to probably make your reaction time worse. It's going to make your hearing probably worse. Like, the human body is not really designed to be weightless in space. So if we were capable and willing to send somebody to even Mars, we would definitely load up a computer with just regular PC games. We wouldn't have custom space games just for for astronauts. There might be a couple of training like games. Seriously, nothing is canceling this character's ability. Well, we got a lot of quick victories, so we definitely got lucky. But there still is a major problem here as far as just we have 11 days to try and get up and ranked, and also to try to get to at least 5,500. Honestly, I don't know if it's really worth it to even try to get the legacy packs anymore. I probably would just focus on getting up and ranked. I guess if I get up and ranked to platinum, then I'd go back to the festivals and get legacy packs. Hideo Kojima in particular is really somebody who only makes headlines that are irrelevant for the most part, and he doesn't seem like he has any deep things that he's getting quoted on very often. I think he is a very shallow level artist creator. I don't know a better way to really say it than that, yeah. There are many times where it feels like the game industry is pushing this idea of the auteur director. I think that's the right phrase. The auteur producer. The idea that there's this genius level creative at the top or near the top of a management scheme of a business, and they're really the one putting all the creative work into making games, and their subordinates are often only named in credits at best, if they're even given credits in games, but they definitely are not put up front to be interviewed or ask any questions. I'd be much more interested to see mainstream video game journalists try and interview mid to low level programmers, artists, story writers, music composers, even QA people, and get their ideas and concepts out there and promote them than this auteur developer creator concept. And particularly with Kojima, even if we were to buy into the idea that all the ideas in Death Stranding are his ideas, and all the ideas in the Metal Gear Solid that he touched are his ideas alone, and he was the only creative on the project at all, which maybe in a Japanese company maybe there's a little bit more of that, where it is true that the person at the top makes demands and everybody below them just follows those demands and doesn't really contribute creatively at all. But even if you were to buy into that idea, that only then says that Hideo Kojima is a wild and crazy person, because that's what you get with Death Stranding and the Metal Gear Solid games. You get really crazy, wild concepts that don't really play off anywhere much as the mystery and intrigue that they start with. The best parts of Death Stranding, from my perspective as somebody who hasn't played Death Stranding, were the trailers and teasers for the years coming up to Death Stranding. Watching these weird trailers hinting at some weird visuals. When you actually play Death Stranding, the balancing your pack and not falling over and being a postal carrier effectively, that gameplay is not something anybody really loved when it came out. And the fighting the black goo monsters sequences, I think, were at best only tolerable. I didn't hear a lot of people loving those sequences either, which really just points to Hideo Kojima probably best suited to just make weird anime. If he was just a weird anime creator, and was only making the cutscenes of Metal Gear Solid and Death Stranding, and turned that into a 2-hour weird movie, that's probably better. I don't think he really respects the medium of video games or has any interest in really making making good gameplay mechanics. He's made experimental gameplay mechanics, but I don't think they were good, particularly in Death Stranding. I also wanted to point out that while I still am seeing some cosplay, here we have one of the ladies from Breath of the Wild and probably Tears of the Kingdom. They're doing a sample images here just so you can directly compare this lady's cosplay. You can see a very good approximation on the top. Maybe you've got the colors and shapes a little off on this little belt buckle. Maybe you've got the amount of white skirt and a pattern here that I don't really see there. The makeup is really good. The wig is really good. Noticeably though, there's a lot of gold being highlighted in this character, and I think that's a major aspect, and this cosplayer has gone away from gold in other ways for more of a white silver look. And since this character, if this is a character I'm thinking of, was in charge of the big desert area which implies bright sunlight, I think the gold probably should have stayed. The weapons here don't seem like they 100% match, but overall this is a pretty great cosplay. I don't know if we ever see shoes or anklets on the character. For this comparison, you don't have anything there. So yeah, really good cosplay. Probably a professional cosplayer. Yes, again, the cosplay that sells is a cosplay that tends to show more skin than you would usually show if you were just regularly dressed. But I'd hardly call this particularly inappropriate if you were at a Comic-Con wearing this cosplay outfit and a 6-year-old kid ran past you or was looking at you or taking pictures of you. That would probably not cause any real complaints. Might be a danger here in that there's some skimpy underwear, thong bikini type underwear under there, but they're not emphasizing that. This is hardly what you'd call lewd photography or cosplay. Yep, it does occasionally suck that you run into these situations where there's, hardly even getting to play. Probably should activate spells. Since I'm about to lose anyways. Just so we get daily quests done. And while there was that one cosplay, I will say we're in this weird situation where Twitter, like, there haven't been too many major controversies around Twitter in the past week or two, but it definitely seems like fewer and fewer people are posting to it. Like, that's basically the only cosplay I've had in the past 4 or 5 days to show. And yeah, I do hear some speculation that Twitter is basically refusing to pay both Amazon warehouse service and Google for some of their hosting features, trying to, I assume, renegotiate a better deal. But if even more back-end features fail or run into problems, Twitter is not going to be better. Inherently, I think because everybody on Reddit is upset with the Reddit's got CEO and Reddit in general, they are losing time and momentum to hate on Twitter. The anger mob can only focus on one thing at a time. My real concern is that we're going to just see potentially a major elimination of what the internet is and a backslide into what the internet used to be, which was a much smaller, less connected, less useful internet. That being said, one of the major problems I think that the internet has right now is that there are the top 5 to 20 websites that everybody goes to, and it would be beneficial to split it up a little bit more. It's crazy to think that almost everything you would want to purchase would be purchased through Amazon.com, or that every kind of video you want to watch is on YouTube. A little bit more competition would do the internet good. They seem to me like they're making a bigger deal about Juneteenth in the past couple years. I think they made it an actual holiday, if not statewide holiday in the United States, or maybe even a federal holiday. But I don't know if you really want to say happy Juneteenth, really, since it is the anniversary of slaves in Texas being told that they'd been free for months and slavery was illegal. The Texans at the time, the government at the time, was trying very hard to keep it a secret and get as much free slave labor as they can. It is probably a great example of censorship. Like, here's a worst case scenario of censorship, is that you have actual rights reaffirmed to you, and that you have a right not to be a slave. Although, in fairness, the United States Constitution even now allows for slavery under imprisonment, so there is still very much backdoor slavery in the United States, in which people get thrown in jail, minorities in particular, get thrown in jail, and then on flimsy pretenses or stupid drug-related reasons, and then they're enslaved and forced to work. Or they're forced to work at severely reduced, unfair wages, but still forced to work regardless. But yeah, to literally have censorship in such a way that people don't even know that they've been freed is a big deal. I don't know if video game companies really should celebrate Juneteenth too much, but I also haven't seen a lot of them do anything. Like, you have just kind of a somber black background, white text. In honor of Juneteenth, we have the opportunity to educate ourselves and engage in real progress towards greater equity and freedom. Equity being the buzzword now instead of equality, or equal opportunity. Which I would definitely argue that minorities in the United States have not been given equal opportunity yet, let alone making an argument that there should be equity in the sense that you have equal outcomes for everybody, regardless of how much one person puts in effort or not. Inherently, talking about equity as a corporation is ridiculous, because then you would have to back that up as a company, BioWare would, by paying all their employees the exact same salary, from the lowest QA employee up to the highest CEO. Yeah. And at certain points, that's just a standardized pay or a socialized pay, and people would just call that straight up socialism, which, okay, if you want to call it that, that's fine, but yeah, I definitely feel like it should be more of a somber thing. So when you have like Crystal Dynamics saying Happy Juneteenth and putting a little more effort into it, it just seems a little weird. And as far as video games go, I don't know what you really can say or do around Juneteenth. So you might as well barely mention it or not mention it at all. At the core, there's about 50 to 51% minorities in the United States, of different cultural and races, cultural backgrounds. There is definitely not 50% of minorities depicted in video games. Juneteenth in particular, African Americans are somewhere around 20% of the populace in the United States. There is definitely not 20% of all characters in video games that are African American. And at a certain level, that may have a lot more to do with trying to sell the games in Asian countries, where the type of racism is slightly different, but it is severely more blatant and upfront against African descent people. So, yeah. What I would say is that if video game companies want to get in on Juneteenth, they should be releasing skins of characters. That would make a lot of sense overall. You have... And frankly, that could be just the default for almost every game. It wouldn't be super crazy to say, hey, Resident Evil 4 was really popular. It's sold, it's done its thing, you've played as Leon, you've seen the main characters. This Juneteenth, let's throw out a new protagonist skin of a different character. We won't call him Leon, it won't just be Black Leon, but it'll play the same way. The model will be pretty much the same. As far as the animations and anything, it could be very rough. But yeah, I could certainly see throwing that out, and then during Women's Appreciation Month, you throw out a female protagonist skin for the same type of game. Gay Pride Month, you throw out, I guess, somebody colored more in Pride colors. Horizon Forbidden West kind of did that, but maybe you introduce new characters. It's probably better to introduce new characters than just put a skin over old characters. This would, at the very least, give artists an opportunity to throw out new characters as a concept. If all of a sudden there was an African American hero that people played in Resident Evil 4, and he has a new name, but you hadn't gone as far as giving him any backstory or anything like that, you could then say, hey, this character and this skin sold very well, or was played a lot. Since we gave it away for free, they should give it away for free, definitely. Maybe we'll bring that character into the next game. particularly when you're talking about Resident Evil 4, it would make a lot of sense to just make a new model for Sheva and put out a skin where you play as Sheva. Then you already have the experimentation of what a Resident Evil 5 remake skin might look like. Or maybe you don't do Sheva, but you do Sheva's male friend that shows up for like half a second in Resident Evil 5. Let's see. What other games are super popular right now? Like Resident Evil 4 is the most recent one I can think of that to use as an example. But yeah, that's where I would like to see, if video game companies want to celebrate Juneteenth, they really should put out something for the player. Even if it's just a concept art on Twitter, instead of doing the low effort lip service, which they're not even doing much of. I only saw 2 messages so far on Twitter. But yeah, put out some concept art, put out a skin, actually commit to it, or just admit that you're not really committed to it and don't celebrate the holiday, which that works pretty well too. If video game companies just focused on making video games and stopped having their Twitter social media handlers trying to justify their jobs by putting out more posts than they really need to put out. Wow, that did absolutely nothing. Anyways, moving on. This probably needs to be our last game too. Sony has lost its PlayStation mobile boss 2 years after launching it. Nicola Sebastiani was a high-profile appointment from Apple. Meanwhile, Sony, I don't know if they've even released anything in that 2-year time. There is an update here, though, that the Chris Davies and Oliver Court-Manchi have been promoted to co-heads of the mobile division at PlayStation Studios. Which, I don't know. I doubt that means anything good. It seems to me like they rushed to find a replacement. PlayStation did announce the Backbone controller adapter for mobile phones a year ago, and now they've announced, or at least teased, the idea of a Steam Deck type device that you would stream games to over the internet, which isn't exactly what the Steam Deck does. Although the Steam Deck can stream games from your local PC, I don't think it streams any games over the internet. But yeah. Certainly haven't seen anywhere as big of a push around mobile gaming and PlayStation as we have seen a push for like the PlayStation VR 2. I recently saw a YouTube person doing more of a deep dive on Sony as far as Sony hardware and Sony CD players in particular, and yeah, apparently they really don't make anything that is reasonably priced that will play audio CDs. The PlayStation 5 doesn't even play audio CDs. The Xbox Series X will. It prompts you to install the Windows Media Player plugin. So yeah, audio CDs are pretty much dead, and we don't really have anything to replace them with other than just streaming and MP3s. But there's no physical medium because micro SD is somewhat missing too. from a lot of cell phones, and you can get an adapter still for computers and laptops. But nobody really buys micro SD MP3 players, and FLAC free lossless audio codec hasn't been adopted as much as it should have been. The EU also has announced that by, I believe, 2027 they're going to force all cell phones to have removable batteries, which maybe if you have replaceable batteries, arguably even just removable for recycling would be a good law. If the EU forces phones to be that way, it does make an argument that maybe in the United States and other places we'll get replaceable battery phones once again. And then if you're taking off the back of a phone to change the battery, then that gives you more room to potentially have a micro SD slot added back in. I definitely need, next time I buy a phone, to be more of a gamer and buy a gamer phone, because trying to play 2 or 3 games at the same time on Android is having me consistently run out of RAM. And usually it's not 2 or 3 games. Usually it's Destiny Child is playing itself automatically, and then I'm playing Star Trek Lower Decks, and then I'm also playing audio streaming in the background from like YouTube. And there's just not enough RAM there to do all of that. So one thing, usually the audio in the background gets shut down, and then it gets awkwardly quiet, and I definitely cannot abide that awkward silence just sitting around, because most of the games I'm playing have already been muted, so there's no sound effects coming out for the game sound effects. Looks like I'm gonna have to go one more round before I lose. Phil Spencer has a new banner here. It looks like, or at least I'm paying attention to it. Starfield September 6th, Forza Motorsport October 10th, and then Towerborn, Senua, and Aero Avowed, and Flight Simulator all 2024. You can see there's a whole Xbox with the LGBTQ plus progressive flag, I guess is maybe what they're calling it. Weirdly though, this bump as it wraps around as this long thin flag doesn't give you the smoothest of circles, but clearly somebody made this, and what is this on Twitter? I don't even know. But yeah, he put out probably the most informative Juneteenth thing of the 3 people who have said anything around Juneteenth. And that's by effectively quoting the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. So it says, today is Juneteenth, the day that 2 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, more than 250,000 illegally enslaved African Americans finally learned they had been freed. We recognize this as an important day in our history and an opportunity to learn, reflect, and grow. So yeah, definitely a more somber, less flippant way to address historical events, and arguably maybe every holiday and historical event that's remembered probably should be based on some terrible thing somebody did. We should learn from our mistakes more than have these happy-go-lucky holidays that are mostly made up. Yeah. It's easy to sell, obviously a generic happy-go-lucky concept, though, than it is to have the, like, have people talk about and remember, say, the anniversary of Hiroshima, or the beginning of the Holocaust, or something, the beginning of World War II. Yeah, we don't really celebrate or talk about those events as much. This would be crazy if somehow I win here. So here, you can't really zoom in on it, but here is the Emancipation Proclamation, or at least a publishing of it, from 1864. Now, I would argue here, and maybe I need to do some more research before making this argument, so I could be wrong, but my understanding is that the Emancipation Proclamation specifically said all slaves in the southern rebel states were free. I don't believe it said that slaves in the northern states, which there was a couple, were freed. So they may be watering this down by saying all slaves are free. Although this is also a direct quote from Major General Gordon Granger, General Orders Number 3, Headquarters District of Texas, Galveston, June 19th, 1865. So maybe in the meantime, all slaves had been freed. And the Emancipation Proclamation might be an interesting first instance, or at least very early instance, of what effectively would be called an executive order in the United States history, very much before the concept of an executive order had been really legally verified. In early days of the U.S. federal government, Congress and the House of Representatives were much tighter on their controls, and for the most part tried to limit the presidential power in the executive branch and try and make it more of a balanced system, much more balanced than it really is these days. That being said, with the Civil War happening, I think all bets were off at that point, and Abraham Lincoln was given carte blanche to do whatever he wanted, in the same way that I think George Washington was given carte blanche to do whatever he wanted to effectively establish the United States and defeat the British. Okay, so we did 10 destroyed cards. We've dueled in the festival 30 times. We have another duel in the festival for another 12 times. And then synchro summon a monster in the festival, which I just don't know if there's a way to even do that in the other festival at all. So I may not be able to pull this off. That being said, you get diminishing returns also. Do it 5 times, you get 70. Do it another 5 times, you only get 60. Another 5 times, you only get 50. Another 5 times, you only get 40. And another 10 times at that point, you only get 30. So yeah, stopping here wouldn't be the worst idea. All the daily quests for the most part are done, but notice that I have only 2 daily quests here. It refreshed, and I should have 3 new daily quests, and yet I don't. Then we have yet another login, yet another Duel Live. 480 gems overall. This whole proficiency test, I really didn't seem like it went anywhere. They have finally figured out a way to fill up this entire banner, but they also have really still failed to really tutorialize new players into the world of playing Yu-Gi-Oh, a 25-year-old game. And so we are now just saving up for the next big expansion. Let's see. We have a GameDeveloper.com article here. 343 says Halo Infinite has become a, quote, consistent live service title, but still needs more, quote, quality, which, okay. Consistent is probably not the verb you want ever to describe your game. That doesn't inherently mean good, it just means it's not sometimes good and sometimes bad. Apparently fans are complaining about the Game Gear audio in Sonic Origins Plus, which that seemed fairly predictable that these ports of Sonic games were once again potentially going to be done with little polish and little effort. This is a Video Games Chronicle article. And then Hideo Kojima also said that he is, quote, deeply involved in making the Death Stranding movie. He won't be in the director's chair, however. I seriously doubt that you could make a Death Stranding movie and make it make any sense at all. That does just seem like craziness. And then we have like Naughty Dog here, which they have an interesting little thumbnail here. I don't know if that's supposed to be a Pride thing. It doesn't really look like it. But they had a Happy Father's Day post here. And of that, you have Ellie giving like a best dad to, I believe, the guy who nearly killed her. Yeah. And then I don't even know who this couple is. But it seems like a dumb way to go. Unless these are the 2 gay characters in the TV series. And this is Ellie in the background. Or these are completely different characters. I think inherently you probably needed to name these 2 characters for it to be helpful, because this pencil sketch and these 2 blonde girls, I just don't recognize them at all. If one of these is the guy from Last of Us 1, he was kind of like a nice dad right up until the end when he nearly turns her over to be experimented on, and then he saves her, but then they kind of do a 100% character assassination on Joel, I believe is his name, in Last of Us 2. So best dad either way just doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's see, if we were to try and look at the comments, I can never figure out on Twitter, which I've just never even figured this out as far as how it works, as to how to see comments. You have to potentially, I guess, click in the right place. So we see some extra pictures here. and I imagine they're probably somewhat censoring. So, happy Father's Day, Nate and Joel. I don't even know who Nate is. Yeah. Now, this guy wasn't actually a father, but he was definitely a father figure in the Walking Dead game, which has nothing to do with Last of Us. I have no idea who Nate even is. Well, here you have like a Big Daddy Father's Day memes. So, yeah. And noticeably, nobody's going to really push Bioshock or promote that with a Father's Day meme this year because there's just not going to be a new Father's Day thing. This tweet feels disingenuous. Here you see Joel murdered, I think potentially beaten to death. I think my what's her name? Yeah, it seems like at a certain point Twitter stops showing photos or puts the photos up at top. This does kind of point out that there isn't a lot of... Yeah, here's somebody memeing. There really aren't a lot of father characters, true father characters at all. I guess God of War is potentially a true father character, although I don't even know if he is biologically related to the boy or not. I don't even know what that is. But yeah, as far as true father characters in video games, and I guess that's all the comments, there's very little, and even father-like characters, there's very little in video games. And I think there's probably a lot of reason for that too. Like, it doesn't really make the most sense that you would have a father figure in most stories. Like, particularly if you're going off on an adventure. A Zelda game doesn't make a lot of sense if Link's father is still around, sending him off on an adventure. Link notably not really having a father character. Closest comparison would be, I guess, the Great Deku Tree in Ocarina of Time. But it also doesn't make a lot of sense to play as a father figure because you just don't want that hanger-on kid co-op character that you have to take care of. So either on one hand you play as the child of a father figure, and then the father figure either gives too much support for a game or becomes a nag and is annoying, or you play as the father figure and then you have a child character who becomes a nag or is annoying. And certainly in the Walking Dead games, that worked into the gameplay mechanic for that first season, and that was the whole idea. But that's pretty much the only time it's made any sense at all. Notably, you tend not to have mother figures in video games either. If anything, I guess I can't think of a single mother figure that isn't some kind of like monster queen, Lilith from like Darksiders or something, which that's a terrible example, I'm sure. But yeah, really trying to think of any mother figures or anything like that. arguably it is kind of crazy that The Last of Us 1 has been out this long and nobody has thought to the idea of just copying Last of Us 1 and making a good, well-written mother figure character. As much as you have Joel, why not just make a female Joel? There's got to be some character I'm not thinking of. Almost certainly there is, but I literally can't think of it. Like, if you told me Chell from Portal was actually a mother, and she had like a daughter out there outside of the laboratories, that might give her a little bit more motivation, certainly. But you wouldn't really have those interactions between mother and child. Ironically, I guess this is why we still need adult games, because come to think of it, the one way to see a father figure or a mother figure in video games is to head over to the adult section of Steam and look for daddy, like gay, guy on guy adult games, or MILF, mother adult games, and you'd find way more mothers and fathers that way than anywhere else. There is the semi-adult game Daddy's Daddy Dating Simulator, that there's a bunch of dads there. And then Honey Pop, I believe, has at least one MILF character. Again, semi-adult game, still. Both of which, I'd say Honey Pop is actually an adult game. And then I wanted to also just mention as the final big news that TubeBuddy here has 700,000 subscribers. I don't feel at this point like TubeBuddy has done enough to deserve my praise anymore. Like, I just don't think it helps much at all with the small content creators. I don't think they're saying anything that's new or useful. And a lot of times they're just kind of evaluating people's shorts and videos and then not really saying much of anything. Some of their feedback can sometimes hit the nail on the head, but they sell themselves very much like they know the answers, and I don't think they know the answers. And I think they've gotten 700,000 subscribers and their success on the backs of feeding off the desperations and the hopes and dreams of other content creators, while not really having a symbiotic relationship in which they actually provide the right kind of information. Like, theoretically, everybody that knows about TubeBuddy should be benefiting greatly from using TubeBuddy. I'm not even using TubeBuddy anymore, really. None of their plugin, none of their stuff is really helpful. And frankly, the features that they sell at a premium should just all be built into Steam. I mean, into the YouTube Studio Google page by default, instead of being this third-party plugin. So, after making a ton of shorts, we now have the next fest, which is going to be annoying. So, my mouse cursor at that point did not move at all, and it automatically blurred because I clicked on the tab. So that is going to save me from moving all the way to the left, which is, I can still do that if necessary, but instead of moving several thousand pixels, 1,000, 2,000 pixels to the left, all I have to do is stay where I am and then move to about the 20 pixels to the right to unblur. The only real problem is if I were to click on something or close the page right over here, it might unblur at that point. So the danger here is I could make a ridiculous amount of extra YouTube shorts. A lot of these would be very redundant. The next fest is happening too quickly, so I think we would skip this. It is also just demos and live streams of games, so it's an attempt to get people who should be hyped, if anything, from the Summer Game Fest to make them more hyped or get them hyped about other games. Definitely feels like there are some different games here as far as these demos, but it's frankly just too much. It's too much work and it's just not relevant. A lot of these demo games, a lot of these games in general are, sorry, I'm gonna have to get really good about unblurring. I'm not seeing the blur on my main monitor that I'm looking at. I'd have to be looking at the third monitor actually. I doubt there will be any adult games as far as the Steam Next Fest anyways. So perhaps I could improve my code, but I don't think I'll spend any time on that. I still need to find music and listen to music to get a random assortment of background music. I think what we'll probably do is I'll stick with the Summer Game Fest, which would have been E3. I'll stick with Gamescom, the German event, Tokyo Game Show, if there are games announced that way, and then maybe PAX East and PAX West. And that would be 5 events over the course of a year to make special YouTube shorts around. When we get into a full sale or a Black Friday, Christmas type sales, those are going to be more games on sale than games being announced, so there definitely isn't a reason to make YouTube shorts around all of that. You can see there's just a massive amount of things that are going to be streamed. I scrolled down for quite a long time and we're only 2 to tomorrow. And there obviously is just a big list of like the top 20 here. There's no rewards for doing any of this either. So, and what's interesting about that is I just clicked on what was effectively like a JavaScript to change the page, but it didn't change the URL in as far as where we are, so it didn't blur that time, which that should be fine. But yeah, it's far too early to be hyping this up. This really should have been, as a Next Fest, something that happened, I would say 2-3 weeks from now. Otherwise, as far as the Steam front page, we've got some sales and that's about it. What is this? Needy Streamer Overload. Death Stranding for $20. Still promoting the Steam Deck and Valve Index. I wouldn't be surprised if the Valve Index either gets an upgrade or gets removed and just given up on. You could still do the Discovery Queue, but No real reason. Come on. Okay. So we'll start going through the Video Games Chronicles articles. Now, arguably, with better programming, I might be able to make it so it doesn't blur each one of these tabs. Otherwise, I am going to go through each of these articles and then have to just always unblur it. So we'll do an experiment here, and I'll keep the mouse cursor on the right and see if it automatically unblurs or not. Some of these stories, because there wasn't a lot of news over the weekend, are going to be somewhat redundant. Microsoft saying it's not planning to shut down Arcane Austin. See, even over here on the corner, it still blurred it. Phil Spencer has explained Halo's absence from the Xbox showcase. There we have a crashed tab. Firefox is still really bad about crashing tabs. But you just click restore, so it's not that big of a deal. Square Enix U-turns on Final Fantasy XVI Day 1 patch. An update is now planned to improve performance in various issues. They said previously that it would not need to do so to have a Day 1 patch, which I guess that's a bad way to announce it, but it is the right direction to go to actually support your brand new project and release. Now I am noticing that there seems to be a slight frame interpretation that's happening, probably because the advanced scene switcher macro is just taking a little longer to happen. So when I am clicking to closing a tab and moving to the next tab, it's popping up for a brief second just my background, my black background that says Rydo. But you know what, that's probably better to go that route than not. And maybe I could fix that by switching off that image, and then it would just probably black out to a black image for half a second, half a frame. Well, you can't do half a frame, one frame. The Callisto Protocol's final chapter has been confirmed for this month, first on PlayStation. Is this even a screenshot from the Callisto Protocol? I guess it is. Like, it has been forever just poisoned with the remake of Dead Space 1, which also, the remake of Dead Space 1 has not really been supported enough to make you think that you really are going to get a Dead Space 2 remake or a continuation of that series. If anything, it does just seem like they rushed out a remake of Dead Space 1 to hurt the Callisto Protocol, and now that the Callisto Protocol is potentially hurt, they may take 10 years to come out with a Dead Space 2 or continuation. I wouldn't be surprised though, since it did seem like there was some really head-on competition. You might even call it nasty competition between Callisto Protocol and the Dead Space remake, that I wouldn't be surprised if Dead Space also releases some kind of final chapter or DLC or something to once again try to steal the oxygen out of the room, as they so successfully did during Callisto Protocol's launch. Let's see. Square Enix says that it will remove pre-release Final Fantasy XVI videos and streams. Copies of the games made their way into public hands this week. Notably, these leaks probably aren't going to do much, because I'm not really expecting, and I don't know if people really are, that much of a story from Final Fantasy XVI. It would be surprising, I guess, if there was an actual story there that was interesting enough that it makes sense to potentially leak it out early on YouTube, and just putting out footage overall or gameplay out early on YouTube might get you a few extra videos. But Final Fantasy games are so long, I don't know how many people really want to watch somebody else play Final Fantasy instead of just playing it themselves. There's so much grind in it anyways. Let's see, Final Fantasy 16's new Game Plus modes includes a Final Fantasy mode, plus players will unlock a harder difficulty for its challenge mode. I don't know what the Final Fantasy mode, though, unlocks. Let's see. Final Fantasy mode apparently is a hard mode with higher enemy levels, level cap raised to 100, ultimate weapon available for crafting, level possessions abilities carried over, in gold trophy for completion. So it's just a higher difficulty mode. Nothing else seems to really change. It doesn't seem like it's changing the way the game actually plays, because to my understanding, as somebody who hasn't played any of the Final Fantasy games or any of the recent ones, I think there are kind of two different ways that Final Fantasy games sometimes play. One is more of a action-based game where you select every action, and then one is where there's auto attack enabled, and then you press a button when you want to do an ultimate attack. And then of course there would also be the turn-based attacks of old Final Fantasy games. We already talked about Hideo Kojima wanting to leave Earth. Splatoon 3's new DLC we also talked about. Devil May Cry calling it his personal masterpiece. Devil May Cry designer calling Final Fantasy 16 his personal masterpiece. A PS3 exclusive Metal Gear Solid 4 was once running beautifully on the Xbox 360, says the game assistant producer. The problem was the number of discs, which that is yet another issue, is that we have like 100 gigabyte size Blu-rays right now that can play in PS5s, and I believe well, they can play in Xbox Series X's, I know, but I wonder, and I assume they can play in PS5s too, but we don't have anything above that. And there has always been this gap really between very, very expensive hard drives that could have at least 4 times the space, and then CDs, DVDs, Blu-rays, like the burn once or stamp technologies have never been anywhere as dense or just have as much space as hard drives have. And inherently, I guess it's because hard drives usually have at least 2, if not 4 or more platters, effectively the same type of discs inside of them, where single CD-ROMs or Blu-rays or whatever are just one disc that we try to make multiple layers. Hard drives didn't have layers. Of course, if everything is on NVMe, like RAM or non-volatile memory, that changes everything. But we don't really have a mass-produced write once type of RAM either. So like we still have this problem, in that it would potentially make a lot of sense that if there was a standard micro SD or cartridge for games, that they would move to that in the next generation of consoles instead of spinning discs. Otherwise we just need more dense spinning discs, and I don't think we can make more dense spinning discs. We definitely don't. It doesn't feel like 4K UHD video is getting adopted enough to make an argument to make 8K UHD videos discs. This is an interesting story, certainly. This is from the games assistant Ryan Payton, but it doesn't really mean anything either. That's just not how it went. Maybe in retrospect, we might ask, how much did Metal Gear Solid 4 help the PlayStation 3 compared to the Xbox 360? I would say probably not that much for that exclusive, since the Xbox 360 was very much in my mind a breakout hit, where the PS3 may have been physically a better piece of hardware. It was way more difficult to program for and just not as popular. Let's see. We already talked about Hideo Kojima being involved with the Death Stranding movie. We already talked about fans complaining about the game audio. We already talked about PlayStation losing their mobile boss. We already talked about Xbox saying the VR market is too small for its chase. Both VR and augmented reality. If anything, I would want to see Microsoft dip its toe back into mobile gaming and cell phones. It wouldn't be terrible if there was a Microsoft Surface phone and possibly an Xbox phone specifically designed to have like fast frame rate and more RAM and better Wi-Fi connection for faster streaming. If it was, say, like the first Wi-Fi 6E phone that worked on the 6 gigahertz network, that would be fairly groundbreaking for them to experiment with. But Microsoft would probably do better to just have more mobile games released for Android and even Apple. That would be an interesting twist, certainly. Let's see. We already really talked about the Steam Next Fest launching access to hundreds of game demos. Noticeably, Video Games Chronicle here did not try to curate a list from that sublist of hundreds. Let's see. Then Square Enix apparently leaked Star Ocean's Second Story remake. Dead Cells is getting an animated series. This is all old news. Knuckle TV series getting 5 cast members, including Christopher Lloyd. Sony says it's not releasing its first-party games on PlayStation Plus on day one is working for them. Forza Studio Turn-10 is working on a new car customization game for mobile, which Forza is a subsidiary of Microsoft, so there is actually some mobile development happening, come to think of it. I talked about that before, so I had just forgotten. GeForce Now adding Ages of Empire 4 and Dogne. The Epic Games Store's next free title being The Hunter Call of the Wild. It'll be... I wish we could get some stats as far as how many people claim games, because it would be very interesting to see how many people care about hunting games. Overall, they were never super popular. They were somewhat popular back in early CD-ROM era PC gaming days, because that was definitely an era where a girlfriend or wife might get their husband who hunts in the real world a PC game of hunting as just, I figure this is a good gift type idea. That nowadays, though, I think there's less interest in hunting, and there is basically a growing disinterest in even eating meat. So the concept of hunting, I think, also declines with more vegetarianism, veganism, Let's see. Metaphor ReFantasio is also coming to PlayStation and Steam. Podcast. Then Absurd Ventures, we'd already talked about. Some of these we've talked about 2 or 3 times. Final Fantasy 16 copies in the wild. Microsoft confirming it's no longer developing games for the Xbox One. Marvel Spider-Man 2 pre-orders now live. And this tab is just not loading. Okay, we'll just ignore that then. And then Fire Emblem on GBA is coming to the Nintendo Switch Online next week. It was the 7th game in the series known as Fire Emblem Blazing Blade in Japan, which is to point out that if they're bringing Fire Emblem on GBA, they are skipping, it seems, the first 6, which would probably need translations. I think Fire Emblem as a series is probably big enough to justify making a collection of the original 6 games, doing a rough and dirty translation. It's all just going to be text, I imagine. I doubt there's any voice acting. You could try and remake or even reboot the series with the original 6 games. I'm not sure that's really the direction you'd want to go, but it certainly would help Nintendo have more games. If they committed to releasing 2 Fire Emblem games for the next 3 years, then you've filled out your lineup pretty well. And then we're at the, let's see, Gamatsu articles, I guess. A lot of these may be redundant too, and frankly I don't even have that much news. So, Moving Out 2 launches August 15th. Flintlock, The Siege of Dawn has been delayed to 2024. I'm really going to have to remember to blur all of this. So if a game has been delayed, should I make a YouTube short around it? No, but I guess I'll put this on the follow list. And if I go back to a page, it still will blur. Akiba's Trip, Undead and Undressed Director's Cut launches August 1st in the West. One of the things that I'm having trouble with while playing Lord of the Rings, the adventure card game, is that some of the text pops up and it's at a very small font to look at the TV from 8 feet away. And so I'm reading very slowly, like I have some struggle in reading or dyslexia or something like that, and it's just not the case. I just have poor eyesight to read text that small. The text is obviously designed to be 2 feet away, and I'm 8 feet away. Let's see, Tokyo Stories has been delayed beyond 2023. Let's see if this one's on the fall list. No, it isn't. I definitely can see a reason to punish games that have been delayed, and at the very least maybe not punish them but not reward them for being delayed. So when I see a delay, I am going to potentially check it, put it on the following list going forward, but I'm not going to make a YouTube short around it and try and get people potentially hyped around it. Let's see, Final Fantasy 16 painting style trailer day 1 update has been announced. So if you want to check out the trailer, check out Gamatsu. Tokyo Revengers 3D action RPG has been announced for the PS4 and 5, the Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. It's a free-to-play title due out this winter in Japan. maybe not coming out to the West. I've heard of Tokyo Revengers, but I really couldn't tell you too much about it. And this is one of those trailers where I don't think they're going to show you much either. Just a collection of Japanese gangster gang members, biker gang type looking characters. Then the weekly Japanese game releases for Gamatsu include physically Final Fantasy 16, the Japanese rail sim operating the Meitetsu line, Lord of the Rings Golem just now getting released in Japan. I'm sure they won't like it either. Lord of the Rings Golem coming out certainly pushed me to play Lord of the Rings, the adventure card game. Sonic Origins Plus, and then Super Bullet Break. Digitally, you have a fairly small list also. Usually you see 3 to 4 times as many digital only releases. But it's not super surprising that it's slow at the moment. Anyways. Let's see. A Lies of P and Wulong Fallen Dynasty collaboration has been announced. Details coming out in September, so effectively it's an announcement for an announcement. We can see Lies of P also here. I am realizing that I did not put a lot of these games that were at the Summer Game Fest on the fall list. Obviously, if I missed Lies of P. Now, that makes a lot of sense that I didn't, because what I would have been doing is looking at the Summer Game Fest and then opening up a bunch of tabs and then not doing anything more than that. There's a very feminine features of this Pinocchio-like character, but I suppose part of that is also supposed to be that he's a young boy, although he's not really that young of a boy compared to how any other Pinocchio has been depicted. They obviously had to age him up so he could be more of a violent character attacking all these machines. Let's see. Gamatsu says the Persona 3 Reload Japanese TV commercial is available if you want to check that out. And then Natsumon 20th Century Summer Vacation details the detective agency, fireworks, and museum. Now, what I'm realizing here, and this is why I can only do so much programming before I have to actually test my programming and see if it really works, is that up until a certain point where we start looking at Steam games, there's a almost 0% chance that I'll run into an adult game. So it is pointless to activate the blur as it is, the auto blur, not to be confused I guess with the manual blur. It makes sense to activate the manual blur as an option just in case, but the auto blur should not be activated until I hit a certain point. So I need to look for a marker, which I think we could do, but I'm not 100% sure if I can. Let's see. I'd have to think about it. I can make a marker certainly looking for this, like the URL to this Google presentation interstitial. Assuming this always loads, I could look for this. Or I could look for anything that starts with Steam and blur everything from Steam. That would also work. But it would create the problem of looking at like the next fest and then that being blurred immediately. And it could be certainly a one-time thing that turns on and then never checks again. That is one of my concerns about the advanced scene switcher macros, is that I'm concerned that they potentially are going to use more CPU processing power than they really need to. Anyways, moving on with the last couple of Gematsu articles, we have a low poly school management game called Let's School for PC coming out July 27th. Let's School Homeroom is the demo. If I looked specifically for just Steam links, then clicking on these links would also be blurred. I could see people potentially wanting to run the school, but the truth of the matter is I do have kind of a moral conundrum on suggesting that there is any kind of management going on by a principal or even a independent school district, particularly in the United States, as far as how schools are really run. Like there's mostly just 100% neglect, and there's really not too much of anything else happening in the United States and in Japan, and these look like Japanese schools more than anything. I think that is pretty much the exact same case. A lot of neglect on top of a lot of forced labor, in that they make the Japanese students clean the bathrooms and maintain everything and move the furniture and dust and everything. So yeah, I just don't think that there is potentially a career path that is being implied here where you could be an actual school manager. School management, if somebody said they were a school manager, almost certainly is 100% really just behavior management and controlling the students. It probably has very little to do with the physical facilities or how things would be run or any kind of thing like that. And then our last Gematsu article says Mugen Soul Z is coming to the Switch. Physical edition pre-orders open up on June 22nd. Is this available already on Steam? Yes, it is. And while this isn't in the adult section, it does seem to me like you're gonna get some cheesecake, some fan service. Although probably not as much as they're implying here. Well, actually that seems like quite a bit. Let's see. Let's put this on the follow list, and I don't know. Same as the first PC release, the bathing minigames and approximately 120 CGs have been censored. Link below says what was cut for dumb reasons. So it does definitely seem like there is not really a good argument. Interesting. In the article they link to, it's not even being shown here. So you have $47 of DLC on a game that's censored. And while this is 75% positive, I definitely think I would say no to this. Mostly just because it doesn't look like it's that much of an interesting RPG. Let's see. First of all, do research before buying the game. I just found out that from a decision that more than 120 CG and mini games were removed. Also, full censorship. Thought I don't really mind about the censor. The story and gameplay was just a standard JRPG. Sometimes when you wander around, the background grass on the wall are stretched out and look really bad. We're better off playing the original PS3 version instead of this joke of a PC port, especially since modders seem uninterested in fixing this mess. Same goes for the original Mugen Souls. The game is censored and incomplete. It's definitely not worth the financial investment. And so yeah, your first 3 articles there, as far as negative articles, are saying no to it heavily because of the censorship, which seems reasonable. Like, when you're selling an entire game here around these types of screenshots, and maybe originally this would have been a fully naked lady, seems like it would make sense that she would not be in a bathing suit if they're outdoor public bathing and the other girl's not naked. Yeah. It's more awkward to be in a bathing suit in a public bath when everybody else around you is naked, I would imagine. So yeah, that's gonna be a no for me, dog. And so then that's going to bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, which we really have no new news at all. Like, PlayDigit's appointing Don't Nod's exec Abriel da Costa as the new CEO. We'd already talked about that. And then 343 saying Halo Infinite has become a consistent live service but still needs more quality. And that's literally all of this story. All we have as far as GameDeveloper.com news. So yeah, this would be the point where the auto blur should come on, because we're going to go through the follow list cleanup, and in the follow list cleanup there potentially are going to be adult games. Could probably say no to this. It only has 6 reviews. It's from May, but visually it just doesn't have enough polish. Plus, right now, since I've played Lord of the Rings, the adventure card game, I'm not really thinking I want to play that many more card games on top of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which, it's crazy to be playing 2 card games in the first place. So that can go. And then what I would have to do, and this is still going to create an issue, is I'm going to have to scroll down to make sure something bundle Grisea 1 through 8 bundles been excluded based on my preferences. Why? Did I ignore a Grisea game? Excluded by preferences. So I don't understand. I have all these Grisea Phantom Trigger games all on the wish list. This all bundled together would be really expensive. Very positive, 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 and then very positive. I feel like I just clicked this on accident. Oops. Clicked on the wrong thing. See, this First game is tagged as far as nudity and sexual content, and for some reason I'm not seeing that. I know I changed some of my settings. Alright, so let's see if we can fix that real quick. Preferences, mature content, show, all of that. Ooh. Which that might mean that I'm actually going to have some trouble now, because it might mean that none of the adult games were even seen today. Alright, we'll see if that's the case. Now, as far as Grisea and the Flawless Cleanup, I think as I'm potentially turning my head around the idea of visual novels, they're going to have to be a lot more relevant, and they're going to have to be a lot shorter. And when you have like 8 different volumes, and only every volume is getting only 100 reviews overall, I think that just crosses the line. So I'm going to see if we can easily move things from a wish list. Which that's going to take some time. So I think the easiest thing to do is just leave this bundle for me to deal with later. Let's see, on wish list. Nope, actually I can do it here. If I just click here where it says on wish list, then that will get rid of that. And then I did remove the follow list listing for number 8. Now, this probably is a line that I'm crossing, specifically as far as like a need to go back and look at the wish list and probably remove a lot more visual novels. Hold them to potentially a higher standard. It's an unfair high standard, I'm sure, but the truth is, if it is just going to be me reading a kinetic visual novel, or a visual novel that barely branches and doesn't have a secondary gameplay mechanic like a dating sim or something, then I probably, as a content creator, don't want to make that just because it's boring and dull. Arguably, some people have drawn a line and said that it is a little bit too copyright infringing if you're just clicking through every single page of a visual novel and showing off the entirety of the game with very little interaction or input from the actual player. This is Phantom Trigger definitely looks like a game series that would probably be better as a... Sorry, it was blurred. It definitely looks like it would be something better as an anime anyways, instead of as a collection of 8 volumes of visual novels. Let's see. Next we have a game called Gripper. It has some nice visual polish to it. It's out of early access. It's 87% positive. Story-driven action game with boss fights on wheels. So that initial trailer is kind of deceptive about what you're doing. Seems like sometimes you're driving from a third-person perspective, but a lot of times you're from a top-down perspective fighting bosses. And that's fine, they have 2 different gameplay mechanics. Just make sure you make the people aware of it. This game Grindstone is very positive, so we can put that on the wish list. Puzzle game. Match 3. Yeah. Looks good enough. Might be a little overpriced even at $8.99. This is Capybara Games, which, what else have they made? Don't Starve Games, Super Time Force Ultra, Below, Critter Crunch. Below is mixed reviewed. Solitary Journey. Moving on. Here we have a full motion video called Grinded Meat. It looks like it's a little too dark. I'm a little surprised that there aren't more full motion videos horror movies tried to turn into video games, but I imagine it's just easier to make a low budget horror movie instead of trying to add some kind of interactivity to it. But obviously the lighting on this is pretty bad, and it's just not relevant even at $1.99. 10 minutes for a complete playthrough through a really bad resolution QuickTime only game is the negative review, which that's more than enough to believe for me. Then we have a grinding skateboard game called Grind, which we can say no to because it's not relevant, from 2021. And then Grimeland, obviously we're going through the G's. May 2022 with 4 user reviews. Again, I think we just have a relevancy issue here. This looks like a Castlevania game, but there's enough Castlevania clones to skip one that's not relevant. Plus the Steam rating seems to be pretty low on this. Yeah, no, of literally thousands of 2D retro pixel platformers infesting Steam and lowering the average quality of all video games everywhere. This shovelware platformer is almost certainly an asset flip based on the developer's prior history with Game Maker Studio, asset flips, and so on. I wonder if Game Maker Studio is even a thing people are using. Grim Hunt. Again, I think it's just not relevant enough. Like some of the visuals around this, but doesn't seem like people are liking it. Quickly became frustrating due to lack of understanding. The game really needs at least a tutorial how to find the clues and recognize them. Also, it froze up. A lot of early access negative reviews, or I received the game for free reviews, and they still are negative. So that means, to me, we can get rid of that. Also, it's been in early access for quite a while. And then Grimguard. Doesn't look like anything. Grim Tranquility from June of 2022. There might be a situation here where less people were playing games over a certain period of time, and maybe I should give games more of a chance, but that would be very inconsistent if all of a sudden I said between June 1st, 2022 and say June 2023 people were playing less games, thus I lowered the number of reviews or something like that. I'd never be able to keep that straight in my mind. And then our last follow-up, let's clean up, is Griffith Academy. At a certain level, also if I'm adding games that are just coming soon to the follow list, the follow list cleanup is going to increasingly no longer be a follow list of games that have been released and that I can actually consider, and would just become a long list of here's some games that maybe are coming out, maybe. And this would be the secondary marker, certainly, to potentially turn on the blurs. There's a lesser chance in the 5 follow list cleanup games that we look at that you'd see in an adult game, but there's still a chance. But this is going to create a situation, certainly, where yeah, I very possibly missed out on some adult games in this search because I changed my preferences. I shouldn't have changed the preferences. I was experimenting. That's a problem with certainly experimenting, is that you never know what might change later on. Yeah. My other concern certainly would be that, let's see, I guess I could just hit reload here and see if we could find anything. Fashion holiday. Yeah, my other concern here, I keep losing my train of thought, is that I'm going to go through a lot of these games, or want to go through these games, in a very quick fashion, and because I want to move through them in a very quick fashion, I may straight up just not de-blur the games at all. And that could be weird. Now noticeably, when I reloaded, it went from 7,000 games being filtered to 1,885 games being filtered based on my preference. And the main preference that's being filtered here is exclusive, really, to Chinese language games. I'm just saying, show me everything that supports every language except for Chinese. I don't want Chinese exclusive language games. Of the 67,000 games on Steam coming up in this result, that's only 1,885 games. So here we have Fashion Holiday, a game of Texas Hold'em, which I don't really get the idea of Texas Hold'em and fashion, particularly if it's not a strip poker game, and it doesn't really seem like that's what it is. Seems like you maybe get a character in bikinis, or male equivalent of bikinis, showing off different fashions. But it doesn't seem like you really get nudity. And interestingly, here you have an option here to select your opponent between one of these characters, and you can make them either friendly or romantic. Weirdly though, it definitely feels like there should be a adult patch at some level here. It's also just weird to be playing Texas Hold'em in a mall. The interesting thing here, I guess you go with this though, is that there aren't that many Texas Hold'em games. You would think you'd get a new Texas Hold'em game every week, but you really don't. And so my first instinct there was to jump to the left, and I'll have to... It's not a bad instinct to have, frankly. Is to jump to the left and blur regardless. But it did blur anyways. So we have an adult game, and pretty much I think we'll have all the adult games in a row here, called Lewd Puzzle brackets 18 plus. 3D CGI ladies in kind of space latex cat suits. Well, they are basically the same old as it flipped 3D CGI ladies. Seems like it might be girl on girl mostly, or although there is a guy character too. It's rated very positive with 74 reviews, 98% positive. The actual game itself seems to probably be very simplistic things. It looks to me, in the one screenshot that really shows the game, to really just be a card game where you match the two cards. A match 2 game. But they're calling it a puzzle game, which is weird, because I'm not seeing any puzzles. Yeah. Everything here shows me a match 2 game. So, not a particularly accurate description, and frankly not a good name either, just called Lewd Puzzle. And then I guess technically this isn't in the adult section. This says No Zombieland Lucy is the title at the top, but it's called Ella Girl down here. And yeah, it says it's just revealing clothing, but no real nudity, even though it's tagged with nudity. This obviously is a step down, an entire level or two in quality as far as just asset flip 3D models and bikinis. This makes Lewd Puzzle look like a masterpiece in comparison. Now, arguably, there still may be a slight frame of unblurred that's happening. I don't really know of a way to stop that. Like, unless I could find some way to make Firefox itself load the tabs in with a slight crossfade or a delay. But I don't think that's really too big of a problem either. If somebody is that desperate to see video game nudity, anime or 3D CGI nudity, that they would scroll through an entire frame, then they probably should just realize that the internet already exists and you can get a lot more with a lot less work. This next game is called Sex with Maids, and it's flat 2D, kind of colorful ladies. I would say it's more drawn out, so it doesn't really feel like it's done in that much of an anime style. Not really the kawaii style, which I haven't had to mention the styles in a while. Now, weirdly, it seems more like it's anthropomorphic animals in maid outfits than just maids, because there's a lot of characters here with animal ears and animal tails, which, yeah, that's not really getting mentioned in the title or the description. The game is $1.19. It's English only. doesn't look like there's much here. It says it's a 2D puzzle game, but it is pretty much the trend for none of the screenshots to actually show what the game actually is. So I assume it's just a slide puzzle game. In all fairness, they know what they're selling. They're selling adult content, so they're using every single screenshot to show off the adult content, potentially devaluing the chances or lowering the chances of people actually buying it. This voxel miner game looks like a Minecraft game attempt. Aim Labs here is a thing. What ideally I want to do is almost every game that has adult content would have a tag here. So if I could find some way to read the tags here and turn on the blur only at that one point, that would be genius. But what I'd have to do is find some kind of plugin, which I bet doesn't exist, some kind of extension for Firefox that would read the HTML here, and then from reading that HTML change the title of the executable, the window, change the Windows title for Firefox to put in some kind of red flag, and then that red flag would have to be detected by Advanced Scene Switcher and OBS to turn on the blur. And yeah, I'm not sure that would really work. There is a potential other way to do like scene recognition, like scan the scene, but that would be slow and processor intensive to try to do optical character recognition on the screenshots of every single frame nonetheless. Right. Next we have a game called Infinite Black 2. Do we have an Infinite Black 1? That is often the right question to ask. Developer's spellbook. We can see here Infinite Black 1 is 65% positive, so that tells me enough to not bother with Infinite Black 2. Here we have a old NES looking game called Slippery Sammy, which doesn't look like anything. Here we have another hidden object game, which I'll make a YouTube short around, but I won't bother to put on the follow list. Here we have a horror game called Night Security, which I don't think probably is polished enough to bother to put on the follow list. There is kind of this history. You know what, I'll give it a chance. Should I make YouTube shorts around horror games? Yeah, I'll experiment with that too. There is this history though, certainly, of a lot of horror games being put on the follow list and then them going nowhere at all. This game, piece of ... horror, I think probably is a piece of poop. So I'm going to say no to that. Here we have a game called Doomer, which looks like it's probably just an asset flip game. Mostly an asset flip of an apartment and the areas around it. I'm going to say no to that. Then we have a game called Korean Political Fighters 2nd, which just definitely seems like this is political satire of some sort that I wouldn't really be able to comment on or shouldn't engage with. There is technically rules against targeting someone in as far as the games you release on Steam. That being said, it doesn't seem to be held to much of a high standard when somebody is a public figure. This Moon Ju-in might be the incumbent politician. I might have heard of him, but I might be wrong about that too. Moon is kind of a common name, I think. Winterland here doesn't look interesting enough. Ultra Clash 5. This is a VR game in early access. Yes, and it's already on the fall list. So I'm not going to make another short around it. I'm going to assume I already have made one. Burger Zombies. Don't look like anything. Rags to Liches. Doesn't look like anything. There wasn't particularly a lot of games today anyway, so it's fairly easy to get through all of these this way, but I'll make a YouTube short around this. But it's a PvP game, so I won't put it on the fall list. If I had 2 or 3 times the number of games, it definitely would have been a longer experience. Vroom Vroom Valley doesn't look good enough. Labyrinth doesn't look good enough. Farm Keeper. There might be a management game here. I probably wouldn't want to play this, but I'll make a short around it and put it on the fall list anyways. OME seems to be really just a visualization game more than anything, or a physics experiment, so I'm going to say no to that. Miwa the Sacred Fox does look interesting, so we'll put that on the fall list. This feels like one of those days where if I ran my macro a second time, I'd probably have a lot more news. But today is also like the absolute worst day to do that. Now visually this isn't super polished, but I kind of do like the creativity here. It does seem like they are going for some very surreal, creepy looking characters and new types of monsters at the least. A lot of spider-like characters. So I'm going to give this a chance. It's probably going to disappoint me, but it's a multiplayer focused game. So I won't put it on the fall list, but I'll make a short around it. 1 vs 1 LOL. It's just a low polygon game. It is very positively reviewed as far as a Fortnite clone. Should I make it short around something that's like a Fortnite clone now? It's free to play, it's online PvP. Now, I think out of some kind of awkward respect, I would say it's better to just play Fortnite from the Epic Games Store than to try and push people to play something with a far fewer number of people online playing it, unless this just became super popular, which it doesn't look polished enough that it would. Euros in book and paper. Don't think there's quite enough polish here to make me want to play this. If you told me this was a really old game, I might be more interested, but I'm fairly certain it's a brand new game, just kind of poorly designed to look like an old game. Let's see, Psy-Quick. Fast-paced psychedelic action game. I'll give that a chance. Doc 11's Railroads. We'll give that a chance. We have like 5 more games. Yodel O. Ooh, this is interesting. Is this VR only? Yes, it is. This is kind of exactly what I would want in a VR game, though, is just a shooting gallery. Although weirdly, this is seemingly based on one of the games from Wheel of Fortune. Not Wheel of Fortune, Price is Right. There's a yodeler game there. Next we have a game called Holy Journey of Salvation. It is possible I missed some adult games though, but we saw 3. We saw a 2D furry game. We saw 2 3D CGI games. That seems to be about the right balance. Let's see, Puzzling Wild IQ Test. I don't even know where this animation comes from, but I definitely have seen like YouTube videos using this garbage animation. I think it's kind of a meme. I'm gonna say no to it though. The Inconvenient Stories. You know what? I'll make a YouTube short around this, but I'm not gonna play it. I'm being fairly generous today when maybe I don't really need to be. This looks interesting. May not be my style of game, but it might be. Let's see. Feels like it's kind of a submarine underwater RPG game where you gather a lot of resources. Which that could be interesting. If you told me this was made with RPG Maker, I'd be surprised. Pleasantly surprised, quite frankly. Let's see. And then we have a game here called Doozy the Unicorn, which looks like a meme joke game, asset flip. So I'm going to say no to that. Then we have something called Noah that doesn't look like it supports English. It's Korean only. And it looks like an RPG Maker anyways. And then we have Cannon Target, which looks like garbage. Oh, I guess I may have more tabs than I thought. Wild West Pistol. Doesn't look like anything. Defend Earth. Xeno Survivors. Yeah, I'm not capable of moving as fast if I have to unblur each one. Which maybe that's a good thing. Like it's not something I by default want, but I have in the past been guilty of really just burning through the non-adult games, then talking about the adult games way too long. When I guess ideally I'd want to burn through all games very quickly. I guess if I have something else to say, I can still close a lot of these games without comment. Tank and Roll. Give this a chance. But yeah, slowing things down a little bit. Probably not the worst thought. I'm actually going to give this game a chance too. Alright, so we have about 5 more tabs. Trouble Juice. Now, inherently, as long as I have 3 shorts, if I have 3 things I can turn into a YouTube short every stream, I'm making more than enough shorts. Probably, depending on how many I'm going to release in a day. Here we have this dating sim visual novel based on a messenger called Tasty Love. It looks like it's a low effort, I guess, Korean game. It's weirdly blurred and not really saying that there's any adult content, but it definitely feels like there should be some adult content, particularly on this screenshot here. Yeah, you would think that each one of these might be like nude pictures, but maybe they aren't. Regardless, the actual game is way too rough, and it doesn't support English anyways. Survival and Horror, The Hangman's Rope Prologue. I won't do the prologue, but if you've got the actual game, I will make a short around that. It's early access, May 30th. It has an interesting visual. I could see potentially making a Bioshock game like this, where there's just ghosts running around, skeletons, other gunslingers, maybe even cowboys. And then you have a lantern in one hand and a gun in the other. Yeah, there might be something to that. And then we have a medical record sheet. This feels like this is stealing the concepts of The Binding of Isaac visually. Like, some of these images and thumbnails look like they may be stolen directly from Binding of Isaac. Mr. Squeezy, for instance. So what do I do there? Like, they're even saying it's close to Binding of Isaac Rebirth. English, Japanese, and Chinese. Rip-off games that maybe are stealing content, or at least very closely stealing art style. Well, at a certain point, I guess, it's the beginning of a conversation, and a lot of the stuff that's going to get a YouTube short is going to end up being garbage. So instead of making my own judgment and saying, hey, I'm not going to promote this because I think this steals too much from The Binding of Isaac, let's just put it out there, make a short, and then inevitably somebody will say this is a Binding of Isaac ripoff, and then I'll say, yep, but don't you potentially want more Binding of Isaac? So this might be a good offering for people who've played all of Binding of Isaac Rebirth and are looking for something like a ripoff. And ideally, Binding of Isaac has one of the best games out there ever. Should be ripped off. People should potentially not go with the same visual theme or and instead go a different way. This is too much of a ripoff in my opinion, but it's not terrible. The last game I saw that was literally stealing content never seemed to be taken down from Steam, which highlights a point that I definitely do have personal experience here, in that I have reported actual stolen copyright infringement game to Valve, to Steam. I've reported it directly to the content creators because it was the makers of Destiny Child. And the game stayed up on Valve and on Steam. And yet, when the Dolphin emulator, which is definitely in much more of a gray zone, starts to try to be listed on Steam, it can't even get listed on Steam until before somebody inside of Valve, either to sabotage another co-worker in Valve or just to sabotage the Dolphin emulator, sends their lawyers to talk to Nintendo's lawyers to preemptively prevent Dolphin emulator being on Steam. That's a big inconsistency there. Obviously, Valve doesn't want to fight with Nintendo, but they're willing to potentially lose any safe haven protection that they might have, which they probably don't have any safe haven protection at all, since they are effectively curating the games that are being listed. But yeah, they're willing to put up a fight against a Korean company like Shift Up and their game Destiny Child of some level, but they're not willing to put up a fight with big Nintendo. Moving on, we have three more games. We have a Backroom Society, which every time I see another one of these Backrooms games, they get further and further away from the generic concept of the meme of the Backrooms, and are now just becoming the new buzzword to put your asset flip game under. We have a Biomech Hell. This isn't really a game I'd play, but I'll make a YouTube short around it. I think there is probably some fandom out there that would be interested in that. And then our final game is The Humans Meet the Ancestors. This looks like this could be an old game, but I don't recognize it, and I don't think it's really relevant. And so then that brings us to the end of the show, which it's kind of ridiculous to have to unblur even that. This could be the marker, certainly, though. This URL for this interstitial slide could be the marker to turn off the auto blur, which that would work very nicely. It automatically turns itself on, it automatically turns itself off. I don't have to deal with it that way. I still probably will end up hitting a shortcut key to at some point, but you know what, if I could stop having to reach over and hit the keyboard and turn on the shortcut key, that would be nice. Just automate everything, automate your life, get it so all I have to do is use the mouse. Alright, that's gonna be it for this stream. We went 3 hours. I feel like I burned through that fairly quickly, so ideally this is almost the exact pace I want, but then there are times where there's just a lot more news and a lot more games to look at. So yeah, I'd like things to be 3 hours on the dot. Less would even be fine, but I'd also like to move a little bit faster still, because I know there will be longer days with more announcements than today. Today was a very light day. Anyways, that's going to be it for the stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to support me further, there's some links down below in the description box. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.